Fight Night event featuring the return of Hall of Famer, multi-division champion BJ Penn as he draws Yair Rodriguez at 145 pounds. It's the second time we'll see BJ Penn at 145 pounds, and this was a return that has been delayed many times thus far for Penn over the last year. That's why I love this fight for BJ Penn, because there's so many times during this last run where he's been getting ready for fights. Ricardo Lamas, Dennis Seaver, I think Cole Miller. Every time those fights didn't materialize, BJ Penn could have said, you know what, this is not meant to be. I'm rich, people. I'm bailing. But BJ Penn himself said, this is what I was born to do. I'm here to make an honest living. And I'm not just here to go and fight people. I am here to make a run at 145 pounds. And it starts with Yair Rodriguez. And Greg Jackson said that it comes down to tweaking a couple of things, discarding what isn't working for BJ Penn or what hasn't worked for him in the past, and work
everything in that last fight.
Sure. But the thing about BJ Penn is, everybody that marvels at BJ Penn, they marvel at him because of his abilities. His skill level is so high in the striking department, the grappling department, the overall mixed martial arts game, his fight IQ, his experience. Now it's trying to bring it into the now. But can he do it, as we're seeing that these prospects are the new era of mixed martial arts?
Yeah, I mean, he is a legend. It is real. We saw where he was at when he was champion, what he was capable of. But that sort of median level of skill has risen so high. It's a whole new world that he enters, and I'm excited to see it.
It's going down on Sunday night from the Talking Stick Resort Arena in Phoenix, Arizona. A rare Sunday night fight card from the UFC, and in our main event, Yair Rodriguez, 14 years younger than one BJ Penn. At 24 years of age, he will also have a small reach advantage over the former welterweight and lightweight champion in BJ Penn, who last fought in July of 2014. We document this on a week-to-week basis, how the sport is moving, and it goes at such a rapid pace. Even looking at 2.5 years, John, the sport dramatically different than it was the last time BJ Penn was inside of an octagon. And that is one of the toughest battles for fighters that are of the age of a BJ Penn, is trying to deal with the new. And the new is Yair Rodriguez, who is fighting a completely different way than the prime of BJ Penn's career and what the standard was.
Yeah, very true. But what we've seen from BJ Penn in the past is that he was the king of his castle, that he was the man. He was surrounding himself by yes men. So training in Hawaii, BJ Penn was in charge. You know, how could you say that BJ Penn needs to elevate his striking abilities when everybody says that BJ Penn's one of the best strikers in the game? BJ Penn doesn't need to work on his jiu-jitsu. He's a jiu-jitsu master. For BJ Penn to get out of his comfort zone and go to New Mexico with all these hungry up-and-coming fighters, in addition to all the seasoned veterans, this is what leads me to believe that we're going to see a new BJ Penn, a reinvented BJ Penn, now working with Greg Jackson, Mike Winklejohn, and of course his longtime coach Jason Perillo.
So. Yeah, you know, it's interesting too. Yair Rodriguez has kind of built his whole game around his root, which is Taekwondo. When he was a young man, you see those double kicks, you see those flying kicks, the hook kicks. That's all built around Taekwondo, and we see that kind of game working with people like Conor McGregor and Stephen Thompson. They use those traditional martial arts, but their root games of the MMA combination of boxing and wrestling is very solid. Whereas Yair Rodriguez, we haven't yet seen those building blocks. We've seen a lot of this and a lot of that, a lot of flying through the air, a lot of double kicks, a lot of spin kicks, and it's beautiful to watch. This guy is an elegant fighter. It's really fun to watch him. But BJ will try to make this about his roots. Boxing, wrestling, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, old school, and that's what's going to make this one fascinating.
It's also, though, we look at things, and Robin, I'll hear you reference things like coaches that are, the old guard is thinking of things that are 2 years old or 3 years old, and that goes for fighting styles and it's evolving at such a rapid pace. I think with BJ Penn, there's a lot of nostalgia attached to this fight, and we're thinking of BJ Penn of a decade ago. Is it realistic to expect these rapid changes for a BJ Penn just over the past year of working with new people?
Well,
I don't know.
That's a great point. Greg Jackson's the right guy. Greg Jackson's the modern thinker. Greg Jackson builds his fight around game theory, really, about using game trees to kind of project where your game will go. And The reason those game trees work, if you're here, this works, which leads to this, which leads to these 3 opportunities. He's the right guy for a BJ Penn because you don't have to redo much. You just build on it. You add little trees to his movement. We like to do this. Now this new thing opportunity is open. You try it on BJ, it works well. So you may see subtle differences in BJ Penn, and that's the right approach for a guy like this. It's just some small little tweaks.
One of the things that's cool about it is in the Countdown show, BJ Penn said, I'm familiar with Greg Jackson. He's been in the opposite corner many times. He said there was a situation where he was fighting George St. Pierre, and Greg Jackson actually approached him to shake his hand, and BJ's like, I'm not shaking your hand right now. I'm here to beat up your guy. But the fact that he recognized BJ's skill, and when BJ ended up calling Jackson Wink to say, hey, can I come down there? Greg Jackson was very, very excited to have the opportunity to work with an athlete the level of BJ Penn. And we know that he is trying his best to come up with a strategy that is going to be successful for the project.
And it is tricky because these new guys are built different. They're built different. If you're a 15-year-old now, you don't train at all like BJ trained. It's something we talked about on 5 Rounds this week. When you invent the light bulb, you don't do it by working on making a better and better and better candle. You know what I mean? So when you have a different technology, and that's what Yair Rodriguez is. So what do you do with BJ Penn? You can't start him from the ground up to deal with this. You have to make subtle choices, subtle changes. BJ's got to manage the chaos that this guy brings. But BJ was pretty chaotic in his own time, so he's not unfamiliar with this.
What about the idea, though, that Yair Rodriguez, for all of his flashy moves, his spinning attacks, he's never been made to pay inside of the UFC. You look at a lot of those attacks, and we were talking about it when we were watching the fights. None of those strikes really seemed that damaging to his opponents. And if you go back and you look at the fights BJ Penn had with Rory McDonald or Nick Diaz, those guys put it on BJ Penn. They beat him up, where Rodriguez just doesn't seem to have that concussive power. The spinning and flashy, but when BJ Penn, can he interrupt some of those combinations and really make Rodriguez pay?
And this goes back to that, where do you build your root around and how do you sort of put your game together? Taekwondo at its root is about speed. The attacks flick. They get there fast. And the sport of Taekwondo is about touching you, not about drilling you. So mobility, light on the feet, whipping kind of things. And there isn't as much power on it. And the answer to this style is to move towards it. You see in all those highlight, guys are backing up and stuff's coming at them. You move towards it and you take the space away. And that's what Greg knows that more than anybody. And BJ knows that too. And you'll see BJ trying to vaporize the space between them.
Is it any kind of a factor, John, given that it has been 2 years since Yair Rodriguez was training at Jackson's in Albuquerque? Since then, he's now working primarily right out of Illinois. Do you feel that that is a factor? These are people that he has spent a lot of time with, that they got to see the foundation of, and now 5 fights deep into the UFC, Yair Rodriguez, I think he's a different fighter than 2 years ago, but these guys have got to see him in those day-to-day evolutions.
You would imagine that Greg Jackson, if he's going to share that information with BJ Penn, he can say during his time here, this is where some of the holes in Yair Rodriguez's game were. Maybe we can exploit those. But Greg Jackson and Mike Winklejohn, they're intelligent enough to know that the kid is driven and that, who knows, in those 2 years, he could have closed those gaps.
And if you're looking at little details, little specific things, they change, but tendencies can stay somewhat the same. So there are tendencies that he has that BJ will know about.
If you are in Canada, the prelims will be airing here on Fight Network Sunday night, beginning at 8 p.m. Eastern Time, and will feature Frankie Saenz taking on Augusto Mendez.